Hey, PerfBytes listeners, before you get started on today's episode, we'd like to mention the generous support of our sponsor, Flood.io. Imagine your load test plan runs great with just 10 threads, but now you need 100,000 users. Distributed load testing seems like a good idea, right? But now you're wrestling with out-of-memory errors and blocked RMI ports, and your load generators outnumber the target servers for JMeter. You are throwing knives in the dark with limited feedback and Mandralic reporting. Say hello to Flood.io. Launch Flood test using JMeter or Gatling, view and share test results in real time, scale out your own grid across the globe in minutes. Flood.io, distributed load testing for everyone.
It's time for PerfBytes.
What the is PerfBytes?
The fourth square meal of the day.
Don't bookmark PerfBytes.
Waffles.
Microwave ready.
Blobbity blah. Blobbity blah.
Add nutritional value to your brain.
It's time for PerfBytes with your hosts Mark Tomlinson and James Pulley. PerfBytes. Whatever.
Hey, PerfBytes listeners. Thank you for tuning into the show today. This is the Mark Tomlinson birthday edition of PerfBytes. Woo-hoo! And I would like to introduce you to my charming and hyper telekinetic host, Mr. Mark Tomlinson.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not actually telekinetic. I might be energetic. Teleenergetic. Telegenetic. So
Okay, we'll go with that.
We'll go with that. That would be good. James, it's my birthday. For the second year in a row now, we're having sort of my birthday celebration on a PerfBytes episode because we're going to be like 2 years old this year.
Wow.
We're like a year and a half.
I
Exactly.
feel like we should go around and like run around on a plane and say, I'm 2 years old.
Yeah, like in dog years. In dog years, we would be getting to like 14.
Yeah, something like that.
That's pretty cool. James, what are you drinking tonight?
Mark, I have a rather interesting beverage with me this evening. It is a beer. It is an Alameda Yellow Wolf Imperial IPA.
Yellow Wolf. Is that anything like yellow snow?
No, and I should point out that I was very concerned for a PerfBytes listener, Mike Lyles, who did eat some snow cream with snowfall in the North Carolina area over the last week, and I was concerned that he was going to be eating some lemon or chocolate snow cream. But evidently he's okay. He's still online. So, us North Carolina guys, we don't see snow that often. We have to be careful.
It's true.
Yeah. So Mark, what are you drinking?
Actually, I'm getting into birthday mode celebration, and I'm having a little bit of tequila. We've never had tequila on the show, so I figured just a little taste of Silver Patron tequila. So, Sláinte. Thank you very much. Our topic, James, today, we're going to talk about something that actually is like revisiting the first time you and I hung out together at Armadillo Willie's barbecue, which was not bad barbecue. It was pretty good barbecue in Mountain View in 2008. And we had a conversation. I had just become the LoadRunner product manager, and you showed up as the longtime LoadRunner guru that you are with, I don't know, about 2 hours worth of ideas to just fill my brain on the next generation of performance tools, which we want LoadRunner at that time to become. So this whole episode, we're going to kind of revisit that conversation about where we've been as an industry with the load testing and performance testing tools, and what kinds of features we should be looking for from all of our many friends in different vendors and stuff like that. And at the same time, anytime you say the word birthday, I'll be taking a little shot of Patron tequila.
So Mark, I'm excited to be revisiting this topic because, quite frankly, I don't think we ever came to a resolution on the LR start and end distributed transaction.
Did we?
Issue.
I thought that was all done.
I think it came down to, well, it's not really used by a whole lot of people.
Yeah, and mostly because I've never used it. And I've never found, I do it the old school way, in separate threads. I never try to combine it in a single thread.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think it actually was implemented in either, I think, LoadRunner 11 with the async capability. So you could actually do stuff out of band on a distributed transaction. But those are the two different approaches there, James. But that's a typical idea of here's a serious thing that impacts practitioners in the field that use these tools, and we need a feature like this, which really kind of comes down to the question of, I mean, James, how do you think you make sense of like the history, the different generations of tools that we've been using over 20 years, both of us together over the last 20 years? What's the history if we look back a little bit before we talk about the future?
Well, let's talk about some common features that almost every tool has. We can call these Generation 1 features. And we'll start off with they have to be able to generate load.
Otherwise, you're just a functional testing tool, right?
Yeah, and it's automated. It's not like you push a button and then 5,000 people in a small foreign country all hit their computers at the same time. No, this is automated. They have to be able to generate load.
Yes, I agree. So the whole invention of this in the 90s when Mercury came out with LoadRunner, it was really the first real elegant way to do concurrent traffic without having to go totally from scratch. The idea of this load generator as a slave machine and building scripts that generated mostly database calls or socket-based calls at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So every tool's got to have that.
Yeah, and second, and not every tool has this out of the box today, even still, is the ability to generate graphs that aid in the analysis and the identification of bottlenecks. All the big mature tools, they have them. The open source tools, kind of spotty, but there's usually a plugin there.
Yeah, even if there's not a plugin, I mean, you look at if you're just a driver, right? And like JMeter a long time ago was just a driver, or Grinder, just a driver. And yeah, there's some logging, but there's nothing visual, nothing graph, and nothing that just helps you correlate. You have to do all this extra stuff. So yeah, we're kind of all the tools at this point. Yeah, I'll agree. Everyone's going to have some kind of visual graphics, of course.
Next up is the ability to pull information from the system, and in particular, these virtual machine models for Java and .NET. So the ability to integrate with diagnostics and profiling. This is something that the big tools with big engineering budgets have had for a while. Some of the newer tools are lacking in this area, but we can still consider this kind of an old school feature, the ability to deep diagnose inside of the operating system, be it virtual machine or physical.
Yeah. I agree.
And next up is the ability to assist with complex recording. Most people think web. And that is most of what's out there. But still, it is like the number one, number two question for most of the large tools is, what protocol do I pick? And Mark, I just want to go on record as stating that the protocol analyzer for LoadRunner, why does everything support sockets and DCOM?
James, everything in the world is based on sockets. Every packet that ever was or will be has come through sockets. But yeah, so it's just because of the way the thing was written. And I actually think the first few versions of that were prior to version 9 is a great idea because it's an ease of use thing. But this is, every time, James, you're on one of these forums and you talk about you need to understand your foundation skills, the protocol analyzer was supposed to help people not have foundation skills. And, you saw how far that went.
It didn't work.
No, didn't work. Didn't work at all.
No.
Yeah.
So that's really generation 1. Okay, so that's generation 1 foundation skills. You have to be able to push load at a system. You have to be able to visualize it in terms of graphs. You have to be able to look inside the machine to see what's going on, and you have to be able to provide some modicum of assistance to the people who are using the tool to get them to use it more effectively. So that's kind of generation 1. So Mark, if we take that and we expand it out and say, where do you see generation 2 taking over?
Yeah.
In this case,
the web changed everything. Late 90s, going into 2000. Really, if you think about these original capabilities in the database 2-tier systems, even mainframe systems, everything we just talked about, that's really the first generation. And the shift happened when the web showed up between 97 and 99. And then everything from Web 1.0 and going into Web 2.0. So 3-tier web into multi-tier web, web services, SOAP requests, everything. I mean, that exploded from about 2002 to 2010 or 12, somewhere in there. And then don't forget about mobile, because I think the mobile wave started about 2005, exploded in the U.S. Finally. And then I think that's your second generation of tools comes between that 2000 to 2012 or so.
And I think we need to give credit to one company which pushed the mobile wave.
Really? Who?
I got to say it's Apple. It certainly wasn't BlackBerry. And Android came after that, mostly on the tablet and the phone side. It was really Apple driving it. I mean, there were some other standards before that for kind of a mobile web protocol, but not true web.
Sure. I remember having a RIM device. I remember having a Nextel phone with WAP enabled. I mean, all of that stuff to some extent, you could tell the usability was really the hindrance, right? It was like glorified text messaging. And that iPhone came out around 2008. And next thing you know, the visual capability, I'll agree. So the introduction in 2008 was really when mobile became a serious concern for most people that were ignoring it. So by 2013, if you weren't, by default, starting with a mobile app and then, maybe we'll make a desktop version, things really finally inverted, mobile first and desktop second in 2013, late 2013.
And not only do we have mobile, I mean, we have some movement on the part of the vendors to try and integrate some better practices. It's not well refined, but they recognize that their success with their tool is no longer based upon tool alone, but there's this huge dependency upon skills and practices, and if they're not refined, it's going to show the tool in a poor light.
Yeah, indicate by our good friend Brad Johnson over at SOSTA and talking to those guys who were, as of last October, on a pretty, I think everyone I ever talked to in the load testing community has said, hey, I just had an interview with SOSTA. And SOSTA is one of the hot new tools in the marketplace that is gobbling up talent as fast as they can get it. And there's and every other vendor on the planet. So I think the scarcity of engineers in this gap has caused this thing, which means that as we talk about where tools are going to be going in performance testing, performance engineering for the future, I think that one of the main things is the ability of the tool to actually guide the engineer with best practices, which is something that has happened in the dev world with IDEs forever. Compilers, all the WYSIWYG capabilities within an IDE, we're going to see that. I think that's going to be an indicator of these performance testing tools that, leave you, James, stranded down in the packet layer, trying to do WinSock correlation on an old PeopleSoft tuxedo, send receive fixed length buffer.
I'm having flashbacks.
Hives,
yes.
You're going to break out in hives. But what if this one idea is that these tools start to enforce the best practice, actually regulate it, meaning that just using the tool keeps you. What does that mean to you?
Well, right now, if we want to enforce best practices, it's a very manual, labor-intensive effort. You take an audit of a script, you take an audit of a test, and the test usually has some sort of text form that you can look at. And it takes someone visually going through and identifying, hey, this is a bad practice, this is a good practice. There are external tools like Sonar, which is used for security code analysis, best practices on development practices, that you can certainly integrate today on an automated basis. But you have this interruption process. You have to stop, bring Sonar in, run the rules, see where you set, then go and address the deficiencies. The next generation tool set is going to have the ability to integrate these code analysis tools into the test design and into the test artifact development, be it a test script or a test analysis session, automatically, and apply these rules to the system to allow you to generate better artifacts right up front and carry them all the way through the testing process.
Yeah, and by artifacts, you mean like the core asset we talk about. Remember our virtual user scripting best practices?
Yep.
I mean, that's the core thing. If your virtual user script to generate load is whacked, and suddenly you've got a new build, or the build is out of sync, or the API changes, or there's different fields or field name changes. I mean, any of this stupid mechanical stuff. If the tools are not smart enough to hook in and say, oh, by the way, that XML payload that you're going to send to the server in your script, yeah, it changed XYZ, boom, and flag you, hey, by the way, your scripts, 20% of them are out of sync. Don't run your test because the test is not valid anymore. So having the tool be able to plug into the code is still, I see everyone leaning that way. SOASTA's headed that way. LoadRunner and the ALM platform's headed that way. But I think doing more than just being connected, making a connection is nice, guys, but allowing us to put some rules and regulation into the process, I think that's kind of what you're saying between the lines there, James.
I mean, realistically, Mark, we see a lot of poorly executed tests, either poorly developed scripts or poorly defined tests where you have 5,000 virtual users running on one load generator, which is also the controller for whatever tool that you're using. The tools and the rules that come with the tool should actually prevent you from doing this. It should
prevent you from being stupid. Like, oh, I noticed that your script is generating traffic on a web server, which is the same name of a host as the load generator. Why are you running load on the system under test? That's a no-brainer from 20 years ago, and the newbies don't understand it. The tool should be able to say, dude, you're generating load on yourself. So, I mean, that's a simple thing.
Yeah. It's like you don't have enough load generators. You only have one. We're going to put a stop to the test and say, well, you have to go through this exception process, which is painful to the extreme, to turn it on if you're going to violate the rule. And then in our test results, we're going to say this rule on test design was violated.
This is the same thing you see in development. It's just, why has it never made its way into test? Why has it never made its way into even the admin management? I mean, yeah, if development can have these kinds of restrictions and rules and automatic enforcement of best practices, we should have it in test.
Yeah, and Mark, if we extend this rules analogy of being able to enforce rules on test artifacts and things of that nature, there's no reason why we can't have a rules engine on analytics as well.
Good point.
Mark, you and I have seen hundreds of systems over the test over the years.
Yes.
And we know that there are patterns of behavior that we look for.
Oh, yes.
Why not be able to get a Mark Tomlinson rule set or a Carlos Chidiac rule set or a Rex Black rule set and apply them to your analysis session?
So if you had some kind of like analysis plugin, James, like in astronomy, like famous astronomers, we could have the Pulley Tomlinson anomaly, and we could have a marketplace for these plugins, and you could sell it to say, hey, let's just plug this thing in, and now Pulley Tomlinson, there's an effect. The Pulley Tomlinson effect is when, X goes up and Y goes down, and Q is analyzed at 15% of the total aggregate score for the yada, yada, yada database. Yeah. See, I love that idea. In fact, I think that's an exact one that you and I talked about at barbecue.
It is. When you look at something like a LoadRunner analysis engine or what's being developed in the JMeter marketplace,
yeah,
there are. It would be natural to allow these plugins instead of looking at autocorrelation for what goes up and goes down inside of LoadRunner analysis, why not apply the Tomlinson rule set against what's there and say, hey, Mark says you should look at X because X is really interesting and it usually indicates a bottleneck.
Yeah, and then you would tweak it to meet your needs and then turn around and share it back to the community. So I think analysis plugins would be a huge, huge win for any vendor that's actually wanting to really embrace the intelligence that's just sitting out there.
And not only that, but you could capture all these artifacts to help support your market. So most analysis is tool agnostic, but architecture specific.
Yeah.
So if you're able to capture that information as a knowledge set, that just makes your tool enormously valuable.
So, James, we're going to take a little break from our sponsor, Nuco, and come back and talk a little bit about other vendors and stuff like that.
Sounds good, Mark.
Hosting for PerfBytes.com has been provided by Nuco, New Centers of Excellence in Performance Engineering, PowerTest Professional Services, The Script Farm, LoadRunner by the Hour, Videratech, Cloud Architect, and No Load Test. For more information, go to www.newcoe.com or call 703-856-8187.
So Mark, there's one last item I want to talk about, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. There's an entire data set that's been available for the entirety of the performance testing profession that the tools that we're using don't really mine effectively. And this is really the log data, or the machine data, if you want to use a Splunk term, that is generated when we run the test. There are patterns of behavior that are easily identified in logs which point to problems in either design or implementation or operation of tools. But the current generation tools, performance testing tools, ignore this rich set of data that's available from web logs, from application server logs, from database logs, as a part of the analysis schema.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a waste as well, because I used to just write a virtual user script that goes and reads a log file and kind of parses it and does a user-defined data point kind of thing. There's no reason. Almost all these tools are now web-based. You could fire, and they have APIs. You could do a web service call into Splunk and get the data back. So, I mean, your tool already supports it, but the tool doesn't make it easy. It's not built in. It's not, that would be a wonderful integration, like a Splunk integration with your testing tool. So you could put in, again, you could have rules and queries every 10 seconds to query something. But yeah, I think that's, again, logs, it's great we got monitoring for a CPU disk memory network and maybe diagnostics and profiling, but what about just log files and exceptions? Like, I think the system's running great and there's no CPU and no throughput and anything, but I forget the fact that I'm getting, all kinds of exceptions in the log that are causing all these errors.
Or what about how many times I am recording every second this static JPEG that's showing up now in my logs. It's okay if it's being serviced by Akamai or other CDN layer, but if all of a sudden I'm serving 50,000 requests out of my logs, I've got a configuration issue that I need to address for optimal performance.
I'll give you another extension of an idea on this, would be that if you could capture the logs, again, that sort of ubiquitous recording engine, if you could record the exceptions when you recorded the script, and then when you go to run the test, you see the same exceptions, you might treat those as expected. Well, it was there when I recorded it, so it's probably expected. But if I see new exceptions in the log when I start running under load, or as I'm ramping up, there's no exceptions at the beginning of the ramp up, and then all of a sudden I start seeing a bunch of exceptions, 500s or weird errors showing up as I start to load, then, that could be really interesting, sort of the applied use of these. Again, takes us back to the rules engine. You could write a rule that says, well, if you don't see exceptions, that would be cool to kind of connect the exceptions at recording and exceptions during playback. That'd be very interesting. And you could see that in functional testing tool as well. Functional automation should have this sort of log sniffer to go along with it.
Absolutely. It would help them identify problems to be able to see, say, a account ID floating between the web server, the application server, the database server, and see which tier is actually exposing the issue.
All right, so I have to give a shout out to my buddy Steve Filoni, who's used to be the Performance Center product manager, and I learned probably almost everything I know about product management from Steve. He was great. But we had these brainstorming sessions, and I probably still have some note somewhere in a file somewhere from all these great ideas. And I have to say, this whole brainstorming idea is exactly what product managers do in any product space, or particularly performance testing tools, is to just brainstorm solutions or listen to the customer complaint or what their challenges are and come up with these ideas, which brings us to sort of a casual discussion about Which vendors, James, do you see, or do we see, kind of picking up on these new problems and these new opportunities and really going after it? Like, in your opinion, who are the movers and shakers that you're seeing?
And, well, Mark, there are different movers and shakers with different product categories in this case. And I guess we should start in the Web 2.0 universe, this integration with the cloud. Who really drove that? Who was the most visible player in that space? And I got to say, it's SOSTA. It is. They really picked up on it early. They started in the web services model. They were fully integrated with Amazon. And they have really driven the definition for future tools as saying you have to be integrated. There is no choice.
Yeah, I think there were other smaller players, but SOSTA has really got their stuff together. They started out with really just sort of the web services load testing and compete with LoadRunner on premise because it was such a clear differentiation to be able to go in the cloud. I know when we finally got LoadRunner on a beta in the cloud when I was there, and I think version 12 of LoadRunner is coming to go even further into the cloud. But SOSTA is ahead of the pack. They've been leading in the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, Magic Sextet.
Mark, it's your birthday, isn't it?
Ah, yes. Speaking of which, I have to drink a salute. Woo!
Cilantro.
So yeah, I think I would give hats off to SOSTA as somebody who's doing that. Plus, the other parts that I like about at least the cloud test offerings that they're bringing to market. One is the integration with Impulse. They have great integrations with partner integrations, but they've also taken on unique patents in functional testing. They've really been pushing performance testing and continuous integration. I know there was a HP white paper that I helped work on a while ago, and the ideas have been around in terms of the HP world, but in ALM. But SOSTA has really gone after pushing the message for continuous performance testing. So I think that's a differentiator as well for them. But that said, recently hearing some of the news about what's coming in LoadRunner version next, which is just about to come out, whatever is after version 11.5.2.6.38.45, something or other, also has some really interesting stuff coming in terms of cloud, in terms of monitoring. They're still also really competing on licensing, which I don't think licensing is. I think it's a competitive tactic and pricing and positioning and stuff. You and I talked, James, about sort of technical innovation more than sort of pricing and marketing. But still, I mean, that's an innovative kind of way to getting into the cloud and delivering things on the subscription basis. What about integration with ALM? Sort of any of the ALM tools, because the big innovator was IBM Jazz, HP ALM, and getting other, like Visual Studio has a huge plugin in the Microsoft world, right? If you're really plugging things into the platform and the life cycle, I think Microsoft also has sort of pushed the envelope in terms of getting everybody on the same team, on the same integrated page. And so I'd say hats off to the Visual Studio world for although it seems a little bit like the Borg, plug yourself into the Visual Studio.
Yes, you have
machine
to
into the cube.
You have to conform to their vision of the universe. It's the new version of Rational Performance Tester and RUP. If you are aligned with the Microsoft philosophy or the Rational philosophy, then their tools plug in and they work seamlessly and very well.
Yeah.
But if you're not aligned, then you're kind of philosophically opposed, and you will either be assimilated or you'll be killed or something like that.
And resistance is futile.
Exactly, but I do want to give a shout out to LoadRunner in an area where people often really dismiss the value, which is on their integrated monitoring and their analysis. Even with however HP has treated Mercury tools as they brought them over and everything else, the analysis and the monitoring piece of LoadRunner is so well refined. It still does kind of define the standard. SOSTA might argue with that. They have a little bit different way of visualizing the data, live analysis, and things of that nature. But as far as comprehensive, integrated with the deep diagnostics, drill down, HP still does a fantastic job, and it does still set the standard for how the other tools have to compete in this area. Going along with the continuous integration side of the house, I think JMeter, with its development basis, has always naturally been there. It's still leading in that area with integrations with Bamboo and Jenkins and other continuous integration frameworks. And as far as velocity, JMeter is just like moving like a bat out of hell. It's on fire.
They are. Well, and look at Flood.io and BlazeMeter, who have they didn't replace they made JMeter better, but they didn't we're not going to rebuild the engine. And then they took it out to the cloud because, well, their SOSTA's already there in the cloud. So they're like, well, we're going to come up with a unique, simplified way. They're going to target the dev community. And now you see Flood.io and BlazeMeter and some of these smaller cloud vendors, they're starting to make inroads right on premise, which is fantastic. Now we're going to see, even more competition. But again, I would say compared to HP LoadRunner analysis and some of the things that most people and newbies would look at and go, oh my God, I need 2 years worth of ramp up just to learn how to use that. Some of the advantage that these other tools, these newcomers have had is this, I want to say it's simplification or oversimplification. Like, you remember that statistic, James, the AppDex statistic? Don't we love AppDex?
Oh, Mark, don't get me started on AppDex. You and I are friends, and we agreed not to talk about the AppDex.
But all I have to do is give you one number, James, and you will know everything you need to know about our application performance. Sorry, James. Calm down. He's breaking out in hives. But you will see, in CompuWare and in New Relic and some of these other new vendors, they are trying to super simplify. I think there's a good middle ground because some of the tools that went very simple just to get off the ground, well, even now they're getting more and more complex. They're putting more rules in. I look at CompuWare Dynatrace. When it started, it was pretty cool, simple drill down. But now, even Dynatrace is like a massively complex tool. It works really well, but, that's the idea. Which brings me to the other question. Are there any other key vendors that you can think of, James, that, are still kind of niche, unique little parts of the world?
There's three I can think of right off the bat, Mark. First one is in the network performance testing space, be it VoIP, service level agreements inside of the network technologies. We've profiled them a number of times in news on the show, and that's Ixia. I think they're a real mover and shaker in the network space, and they've moved up to layer 7. They have some testing tools which are very easy to use for application performance testers. So that's really good. On the service virtualization front, regardless of what we think of ITKO and how they approach their customer base, they have got an excellent tool for service virtualization. And whenever you talk to someone in the service virtualization space, ITKO Lisa comes up in the comparison all the time.
Yeah. I would say there's a lot of people that argue, some of these low-level tools with like network performance, low-level packet hammering stuff, service virtualization, which is stubbing, old idea with a whole fresh new approach in Lisa stuff. But some of these folks are saying, well, do I, that's infrastructure, and don't I do platform as service, infrastructure as a service, and I don't have to worry about that? Well, is anyone at Amazon using tools like this to make sure their infrastructure scales? Are they testing entire containers? I mean,
Mark, I hate to tell you, but if you look at your Amazon agreement, they are not responsible for performance.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing to say you don't need these kinds of niche tools because you went to the cloud. Well, you know what? Sometimes those guys are just nothing more than a garage full of hardware down the street. Granted, it's $150 million worth of hardware next to a hydroelectric plant. But I think there's certain vendors that still, some at the app layer, that tend to combine with these other tools, like an integration with Ixia. Shunra's a good one, right? Integrating Shunra and LoadRunner so you can look at the end user experience and correlate that back into the network itself. I think we should mention SmartBear as a vendor only because our friend Scott Barber is doing things over there. We have no idea. We haven't seen anything yet.
All I can say with Mr. Barber, if you're daring enough to hire him, something is going to come out of that relationship.
Oh, yes.
We don't know what it is, but I'm watching.
Yes, be watching. We don't have any insider information because we're just not that popular, I don't think.
Mr. Barber, if you'd like to come on the show and discuss, here's an info.
There you go. That would be fine. So anyway, that's a good wrap up for kind of just a bunch of feature ideas, which I think would be cool for performance and load testing tools, but also sort of who are we can't say magic quadrant. That's a Gartner thing. So maybe we need a secret square.
No, Mark, I've got it. It's the PerfBytes Dangerous Octagon.
Dangerous Octagon. I like it. It's an octagon of danger. That's about everything we have to say, at least in February of 2014, on the subject of next generation performance testing tools.
And Mark, I want to take this moment to extend the invitation to everybody to the July 4th barbecue event at PerfBytes Southern Command in Monroe, North Carolina.
Yes.
If you want to continue this discussion in person, as well as a live on-air show, we'll have an open bar with some very interesting whiskeys from around the world.
And also vendor arm wrestling.
Exactly. We want to see Scott Barber of Smart Bear square off with at least one other vendor in arm wrestling or thumb wrestling.
Yes.
I think that would be a fantastic show.
I think Barber versus Wilson Marr. I think that would be good.
I'd pay good money for that event.
Well, PerfBytes listeners, once again, you've come to the close of yet another deeply emotional episode of PerfBytes. And of course, we thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the show today.
Mom, I just want to say thank you because I could not do this show without knowing at least one person tunes in every week.
Oh, James, there's like 5,000 people that tune in and listen.
But they're not my mom.
Okay, good point. Very, very good point. And they don't make lasagna like your mom
That's
does.
right. Yeah.
That's very true. Of course, I will certainly give my pre-birthday thanks to the sexy Irish voice of PerfBytes for buying me expensive guitars so that I'll spend more time not writing scripts in VUGen just to pass the time. And of course, James and I would like to give a special thanks to our great sponsor, Flood.io, for their sponsorship and support of PerfBytes episodes.
Mark, today's show is powered by Quantum Foam.
I still don't know what the hell quantum foam is.
This is an educational show.
It's an educational show, of course. Remember, of course, also that all of the content of PerfBytes is copyrighted and protected by the human chain of University of Missouri students who gathered hands to ensure that the rights of our show, regardless of gender association, shall not be infringed by those who may object to the opinions shared on this show. We stand with Sam.
For more information about PerfBytes, visit the show's website at www.perfbytes.com. Follow us on the Twitter and the Facebook. And of course, you can always subscribe and listen to the PerfBytes podcast on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, and Stitcher. Just search for the tag PerfBytes and click subscribe.
And of course, the PerfBytes show and staff are supporters of the Practical Performance Analyst, the Performance Engineering Book of Knowledge, the Computer Management Group, and the Workshop on Performance and Reliability, and of course, the Software Test Professionals community of software testers. We hope to see you at the next STPCon conference in April in New Orleans. It should be a great time, James. We will see you there.
And remember, get ahead of your 2020 problem, or it's going to get ahead of you.
Have a great week, everybody. See you on the next PerfBytes.